You are listening to Skin, Earth, Vitality, the podcast where ancient wisdom meets modern vitality. If you are seeking to reconnect with your innate vibrancy, you're in the right place. I'm Emily Davis, a seasoned holistic esthetician and herbalist. Join me as we unlock the secrets of ancient skincare practices, explore the beauty of seasonal and nature-based living, herbalism, and true holistic well-being for you and the broader ecosystem. This podcast is brought to you by Stratum Aesthetics. Head to stratumaesthetics.com to find curated skincare, body care, and other wellness products hand-selected by me. Now enjoy the show. Please remember that the information I share in this podcast is based on my professional and personal experience. It is intended for educational and informational purposes only. It is not individualized skincare advice, nor is it medical advice. I encourage you to take charge of your own health decisions and listen to your body, seeking out the resources and professionals that best support your wellness journey. Emily here, and I'm so pumped about today's episode because I can talk about tea all day, every day. It's so fun to me. I want to get into how to make the switch from buying tea bags in a box at the store to incorporating loose leaf tea into your life. I get asked about this all of the time because I'm a big time herbal tea lover. I blend a custom blend up and serve it in my shop most days. I make a blend at home every single day. It's just my thing. And if you follow me on Instagram, you've probably seen in my stories, I share my blend of the day pretty often, and I'll share like what I put into it. And I think that there's sometimes a disconnect because I'm obviously sharing it for inspiration. But I think that sometimes people are like, I literally don't know where to even begin with that. And it can feel overwhelming and it can feel like it's an expensive thing to do versus just buying a box of chamomile tea or a messy thing. And so I wanted to address those concerns for those of you who are interested in opening up your tea world. I did used to be a person who bought bags of tea at the store, and I definitely am still. Sometimes I do keep a few boxes around both at home and at my office for emergency tea moments. So yeah, let's get into it. I'm including both herbal tea or herbal tisane in this conversation as well as true tea. So herbal teas or tisanes are made from flowers or roots or leaves or even the fruiting body of an herb or a plant that doesn't come from the tea plant, the Camellia sinensis plant. And the tea plant is like where we get black tea or green tea, white tea, oolong tea. That is actual tea. And the difference between all of those that are all coming from the same plant is just how the leaves are processed or oxidized or when they are harvested, how it's brewed. So all of those come from this Camellia sinensis plant. And then herbal tea is, like I said, also known as tisane. It's more of a quote unquote medicinal or therapeutic tea. Maybe there's a purpose behind the brew, like maybe you're drinking something to help with sleep. And then we also have beverage teas, which are like Celestial Seasonings is a local tea maker in Colorado who does like Sugar Cookie Lane tea or something like that. Sorry, they do Sugar Cookie Sleigh Ride tea or something like that. And that would be more of a beverage tea versus like a medicinal therapeutic tea, which is primarily what I'm making when I'm making tea at home, even though I also blend it to taste as good as possible. But do know that when you're making some of the blends that I talk about today, they're not necessarily going to taste like Sugar Cookie Sleigh Ride. So in this episode, I'll be talking about brewing methods, tools, some beginner blends that you can create to work with your herbal tea, and I hope you love it. So there's a few reasons why you might want to dip your toe into loose leaf tea and maybe ditch the bags altogether. And the first is the health concerns with tea bags. A lot of times tea bags are actually made from plastic. And if this is the first time that you've heard this, or if this is the 100th time you've heard this, feel free to have a WTF moment right now, because it is so mind-boggling that this is allowed. But when you put these plastic tea bags, into boiling hot water, like from your tea kettle, the bag is releasing plastic into your beverage, and you're now getting a nice cup of plastic tea, which is super uncool, right? And even the paper bags that they make for tea bags, like they're not plasticky feeling or silky feeling, they're more of paper feeling. Those often will have plastic linings so that they're not falling apart, because I mean, if you were to put a piece of tissue paper into a cup of tea, you know that would fall apart, right? But these tea bags are somehow not falling apart. So that's nice. And then beyond plastic, paper tea bags are often treated with things like chlorine bleach, and trace amounts of this can potentially also seep into your tea. So a great alternative to using the bags is the loose leaf tea. The next reason that you may want to make the switch is because the tea bags are creating waste, like that single-use waste that's not ideal. And so with loose leaf tea, obviously you do have tea left over, like plant matter left over. And that plant matter that's left over after you have steeped it in water is called the mark. And I will usually just put that out in my garden. You can compost it, but I am not amazing at compost. That's an art that I have not perfected. And so I will just go sprinkle the mark in my garden all year round. And my plants have really loved it. It's kind of like a natural mulch, and it's great food for soil microbes and earthworms, which are so incredibly important. This helps to build healthy soil, and a great way to give that plant material new life again. Getting loose leaf tea is often actually less expensive for higher quality. So we've got mass-produced tea bags that usually contain what is called fannings or dust, which are like tiny fragments of tea that's left over after the processing of higher quality teas. So it's kind of like the tea bags that are on the shelf at the store are like the leftovers, and you usually get a really small amount that's not quite enough to have a therapeutic effect. So to actually get this therapeutic effect of like a cup of chamomile, you would need to steep 2 to 4 bags from the bags in the box. And these fragments lose their oils and flavors much faster than whole tea leaves do, because it's a smaller surface area and there's a higher exposure to air. And loose leaf tea actually undergoes less processing compared to the tea that you find in tea bags at the grocery store. And this smaller amount of processing helps to preserve the natural freshness, the flavor, the aroma. And then finally, since loose leaf tea is usually fresher to begin with, it has a longer shelf life when it's stored properly. Tea bags, on the other hand, often sit on store shelves in warehouses for longer periods of time, which is going to diminish that quality, obviously. So when you do order your tea, I like to put mine in jars, like in glass jars. I do mason jars and then just label them. And then I keep them in a cabinet out of direct sunlight. The last reason why I personally love switching over to loose leaf teas that I just love that you can mix and match ingredients and create your own unique blends, which is such a fun way to tap into your creativity and make something just the way you like it, customize it based on your specific needs and preferences. Now that you know the why, let's talk about the how. I am going to get into a couple of things that might make this feel complicated, but I just want to say, if this is new, keep it simple. All you need is water, plants, and a cup, and a way to strain. That's it. So let's start with getting the plants. You can find pre-blended loose leaf teas at places like Whole Foods, Sprouts, Natural Grocers, and I feel like you can even just find this at conventional grocery stores now as well. So it's pretty easy to find loose leaf tea in a lot of places nowadays. And this is definitely a great place to start, especially if you feel overwhelmed by the idea of making tea recipes. And if you are interested in putting your own blends together, which I highly recommend just playing with, you can find bags of herbs like chamomile or peppermint or rosehip and elderberry, nettle, these types of single herbs in bulk at Natural Grocers in their bulk section. I know for some people it just feels more comfortable to buy it in person rather than going online. And I will say that at the store, these herbs are less fresh than you would get at a local apothecary. And so that's another option, is to go in person to a local apothecary. Google if you have an apothecary near you and go give it a visit. The people who work there are going to be super helpful, helping you pick out herbs that you can incorporate. And then they also will often have pre-blended options that they carry. And this will usually be for a specific purpose, like lung support tea or something like that. And then the next option is getting online. I love Mountain Rose Herbs as an online herb supplier. They are very consistent with their quality. They have a great variety. And then they also have pre-blended options or single plant options as well. I do have an affiliate with Mountain Rose Herbs, so I will link that in my show notes. You can click there. I do make a couple of dollars off of it to go buy more tea, and that's at no expense to you. So I will put that in the show notes so you can easily find Mountain Rose online, or simply head to mountainroseherbs.com. Okay, so you've got to the store, you've gone to the website. What should you buy and try? I do recommend doing some research on the plants that you're going to make your tea with. There are a few wonderful resources that I recommend. One is Golden Poppy Herbs. This is an apothecary out of Fort Collins, Colorado, just north of where I am. And they have a really robust glossary of herbs online. And the next one is Herbal Revolution. They also have a robust glossary. And the way that they have their herbal information set out is in a format called a Materia Medica, which is just a collection of an herbal glossary, basically. The thing is that a lot of information that you find online about herbs is either incomplete or skewed or taken out of context. I myself am not one to necessarily Google an herb to research it and then just take what Google has to say. Because the thing is, a lot of the information you find online is either incomplete or skewed or taken out of context. And that's because modern scientific studies often try to fit herbs into the framework of Western medicine, which is kind of like trying to translate one language into another with no direct equivalent. And herbalism and modern science operate on like totally different principles. Herbalism looks at the whole plant, its synergy, how it interacts with the body in a very holistic way, while modern science tends to isolate single compounds in a plant to study their effects in isolation. And this reductionist approach can sometimes misrepresent how the herb truly works in practice. And we just have to think about it. Like the healing properties of an herb often come from the way that the compounds all work together in harmony, not just from one isolated extract. So when you're only looking at a single active compound in a study, you kind of lose the bigger picture of the plant's full potential. And so that's why I prefer to dig into trusted herbal traditions, historical uses, and experiences from herbal practitioners rather than relying solely on studies or quick internet searches. An example is kava kava. So this is a plant that has been used for centuries in Pacific Island cultures, and it's traditionally prepared using fat-based liquids like coconut milk to extract its active compound kava lactones. And liver concerns have arose in modern contexts when some commercial products have used non-traditional methods like hexane extraction, which has created an unnaturally high concentration of kava lactones. And additionally, some products have included stems and leaves, which contain other compounds that are linked to liver toxicity, which would never be present in the traditional root-only preparations. And so by sticking to high quality kava root prepared in the traditional way, you're not going to see these risks associated with liver damage, which you're not going to get this whole story if you're just Googling kava kava. It's going to be like all of these people saying why kava is liver toxic, which may not necessarily be true. And I'm not saying that you should go out and like load up on kava. I'm not saying that it's right for your specific body. I'm just saying it has a long history, and this isn't necessarily conveyed when you Google it. On the flip side, there are plants like St. John's wort, which is such a beautiful, powerful herb, super powerful for the liver, so powerful that it speeds up how your liver metabolizes medications, and this can make certain medications less effective. So it's important to avoid St. John's wort if you're taking medication without consulting a knowledgeable healthcare provider. All of that to say, a couple of other resources that I recommend. One is the book Rosemary Gladstar's Medicinal Herbs, A Beginner's Guide, and Herbal Medicine for Beginners by Katya Swift and Rin Madura. I will link those both in the show notes today. I think they're both excellent books. The Herbal Medicine for Beginners by Katya and Rin is a great one because it has a ton of tea recipes in it as well that are meant for specific imbalances or situations or whatever. I love that book. So definitely check that out. But a few simple blends that I reach for often are: number one, my most common blend that I make at home is ginger and chamomile. I just do equal parts of both. And it's just easy. It tastes so good. I love both of these by themselves, and I'll do that quite a bit as well. And ginger is like my favorite thing ever. It's like warming all the way to the bones. It's perfect, especially during the winter months. I personally drink ginger all year round. Some people do better with that heat just in the winter. Maybe they have a warmer constitution already. But that's my main one that I reach for all the time. It's amazing for digestion, for anxiety, all kinds of different things. The next one is linden and passion flower. This is like chef's kiss for me for any type of anxiety that I'm experiencing. I swear I am a linden evangelist. You have seen linden trees all over in your neighborhood or lining city streets. She's everywhere, smells so floral and fragrant. I just love linden. It's an actual hug in a mug. I enjoy linden for grief or like mixing linden and rose petals together for grief is one of my favorites. I love linden for just calming, like I said, anxiety, for bringing me back into my body when things feel really overwhelming, when the world feels overwhelming. Linden is so comforting. And then passion flower is another one that will just instantly soothe anxiety for me. It's wild how you can just be catastrophizing and ruminating. And for me, drinking passion flower feels like, you know, that feeling when you're laying in bed and you can't sleep and anxiety is just like taking over your brain. You have like monkey mind, and then you finally fall asleep, and the next morning you're like, why was I freaking out about that? It's not a big deal. And you just feel more neutral about it that next morning. That's what drinking passion flower feels like to me. My next favorite is peppermint and fennel for tummy troubles. And I love peppermint just because I love the taste of it. It's fantastic for giving you a little more pep in your step. You could add a little chamomile in there as well, which will also help soothe tummy troubles. And I'm going to share the sleep blend that I make. I just love this blend so much. It's chamomile, spearmint, catnip, and passion flower. And I always do this like 2 hours before bed, because don't forget, drinking a lot of liquid before bed might make you wake up needing to go to the bathroom, obviously. So keep that in mind. Catnip often surprises people because they only associate it with cats, but it's actually a wonderful herb for humans as well, especially for calming nerves, soothing digestion, promoting relaxation. And that, I think, is just a great reminder that herbs have more to offer than we realize. I grow catnip. It's extremely easy to grow. I would say do it in a pot. It's so easy to grow that it's actually really invasive in most places, but it just goes wild. And I do have all of the neighborhood cats in my yard all of the time. It's probably because of the catnip. My neighbor always jokes that when she looks at her cat's air tag, he's always hanging out at my house, and I love that. So that's a brief overview of a few very simple blends that can get you started. Start simple. You can even just start playing with one plant at a time. Start with just brewing chamomile. Start with just brewing peppermint or ginger, and then later you can do more if you're feeling overwhelmed by all of the blending. To brew loose leaf tea, you don't need a ton of fancy equipment, just a few simple tools. Common options include a tea ball, which is like a ball that's like a net basically, or like a mesh lining that's configured into a sphere. And it is super convenient, but it does limit the movement of water with the leaves. This can restrict the water extraction and sometimes result in a weaker brew of tea. So what I would say is, if you have a tea ball, some of the mistakes that I made at first were like packing it really tight, thinking more is more. But I would actually do less in there so that the water actually has room to move around and dance with the leaves and get a better extraction. My personal favorite is a tea basket. This is a little bit of a better option than a ball because it gives the leaves more room to expand, and this allows for a fuller flavor. A tea basket does also have its drawbacks, which you're still not getting as much of the water interacting with the plant as you would with like a French press or a jar. For me, I find that cleaning a French press is so annoying that I don't want to do that every single day. I did get a really cool Bowden French press that is just one piece, so you're not taking the parts of the French press apart all of the time to clean, and so it's a little bit easier. But for me, the tea basket just works really well. I just dump it out. It's not a big deal. The next option is the French press. So this is good for larger batches. You would make about a quart with a French press. It's great for that better, more effective water extraction from the plant. Next is muslin bags. So these are reusable and eco-friendly. It's great for traveling or for a quick cleanup. You can just wash the bag or rinse it with water. You can just put your tea in the bag and steep it like you would any other tea bag. And then finally, a jar and a strainer. This is a super simple method where you would put the tea directly in the jar, pour the hot water over it, let it brew, and then strain it with a strainer after it's done brewing. This also gives the leaves plenty of space to move freely and have a better extraction. As a general rule of thumb, you would want to use 1 tablespoon of loose herbs per cup of water for most teas and infusions. There are a couple of different types of methods for brewing. The first is a standard infusion. So this is steeping the herbs in hot water. You steep it in hot water for about 20 to 40 minutes. And the next option is a decoction. So this is where you would simmer maybe like tougher plant material like roots and barks and seeds in water for about 30 to 40 minutes. The next is a cold or overnight infusion. So you can let your herbs steep in cool or room temperature water for 8 to 12 hours. And then next is fat-based extraction. So this is mixing herbs with fat-rich liquids like coconut milk or making a moon milk with regular milk for compounds that dissolve better in fat. So turmeric and ashwagandha both do best in fat extraction. I hope you're not feeling overwhelmed by me listing all of these different extraction methods. Don't get too caught up in it, in all of the details to where you're missing the forest for the trees. You can make a lovely cup of tea by placing it in a tea basket, letting it sit for about 20 minutes, and then removing the basket and drinking. That's what I do 90% of the time. This is a great beginner-friendly method. And then after you've got this down, maybe later you explore some other methods and just get curious. Okay, so there you have it. I hope this makes you feel excited to make tea. It's so simple and fun. Ends up being much less expensive than buying a lot of tea bags for such better quality. This is such a fantastic thing that you can do to support the health of your skin, to better hydrate your body. And if this helped you, do me a favor and share it with a friend. If you share it on social media, please tag me so I can see it, and make sure that you subscribe so that you know when the next episode hits. I will be back next week for our 1-year anniversary episode where I will be answering listener questions. And until then, be well. You've been listening to the Skin Earth Vitality Podcast. If If you like what you heard today, consider giving me a 5-star rating. It helps other people just like you to find the show. You can shop products and find all of my offerings on my website, stratumaesthetics.com, and follow me on my social channels at Stratum Aesthetics.